Good morning. I'm Jenny Ray LaRue with Market Outsiders. I'm here with my co-host Namaan, and today is May 20th. Namaan, what's on the roster today?
Well, Jenny Ray, it's May 20th, which means that, of course, we're talking about Home Depot today. I think everyone knows that. But I wanted to talk about
Is it? Does everyone know that, Namaan?
well, if you're in my brain, you knew that.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna say maybe when you were 5 years old you were thinking that, but I don't think everybody woke up this morning thinking it's Home Depot Day
it's
today.
Home Depot Day, at least here at Market Outsiders. So I want to dive into the news that's coming out of Home Depot in terms of, whether or not they're increasing prices. And it's different than what we heard from Walmart last week. So I'm excited to dive into that. And I'm also excited to dive into what you wanted to talk about as well.
Awesome. Well, I mean, it's Home Depot Day for me too, if I'm honest. But I just had to make fun of you because it's so much more fun to remind everybody that you're, a 30 something old soul, and Home Depot Day is not a day that everybody celebrates. So I think
Well,
that's just an important way to start out the day.
it was Home Depot Day, as soon as I saw this headline. And so I saw this headline a little bit ago this morning and I was like, "Oh, okay, it's Home Depot Day." I'm a customer of Home Depot more regular than I'd like to admit. And so this caught my attention for more reasons than one. And it's good news, I think, for consumers. Home Depot plans to keep prices steady despite tariffs, and they're able to keep prices steady because they're pushing their suppliers to keep their prices low. And the way that suppliers are able to keep their prices low is to shift production out of China into lower tariff countries. And so I think this is an example of, the US's tariff policies actually having their intended effect, which is moving some manufacturing out of China. I think a part of what people don't understand is the tariffs aren't just about moving manufacturing back to the US. It's actually also about weakening the manufacturing base in China. And so this seems to be one place where it's working. So I thought the headline was accurate. I thought the rationale made sense. What I actually wanted to call out was Home Depot's explanation for why they're keeping prices steady, which made little sense to me. And so,
If I'm honest, I'm not sure I believe it. So I want to get
yeah,
your take on this one.
yeah. So their kind of communications person, whoever here's, giving the story to the Wall Street Journal, said that strong employment levels and home appreciation mean that Home Depot customers, mostly homeowners, continue to have money to spend on home improvement projects. And my first thought was, if that was true, you wouldn't keep prices steady. And so, what I know about Home Depot's,
If consumer sentiment is great,
yeah, if
bump.
consumers continue to have money to spend, if your customer base is strong, you actually have a rationale to raise prices. But the fact that you are keeping prices steady tells me that you don't actually believe that your core customer base is, either going to continue to spend or continue to spend at the same amount. And so when I look at Home Depot, I see two customer bases that they serve. Number one is the pros, right? It's the contractors. And that industry right now, just because of slower home building, slower home renovations, right? Like who's taking a HELOC out at 7%? Not many people, right? And that's how a lot of people fund kind of home renovations. That industry's taking it on the chin right now. And so you've got your pro segment that's hurting a little bit. And then you have homeowners who are getting squeezed elsewhere. And so the consumer strong, people still have jobs, but from what I'm seeing in the data, I think some of the things that people would go to Home Depot to spend money on, like that's where they're cutting back first, right? It's the home upgrades, it's the renovations, it's the home improvements that are getting cut back on a little bit. And the third thing that I just thought of when I read this article is a lot of what Home Depot sells, honestly, like is commoditized. Like a plumbing part is a plumbing part, a gasket is a gasket. And if your big competitors, right, if Lowe's isn't raising prices, like I'm not so brand loyal to Home Depot that I won't go to Lowe's to get a cheaper plumbing part. And so I think when look at Home Depot, the big picture overall thought I had was, okay, like, of course, your pricing strategy depends on which category you're in and your market position. And Walmart is, right, the king of retail, in a sense. Their customer base cuts across demographics. Um, it's very difficult to trade down or trade out from Walmart if you're a Walmart customer. But the same is not true of Home Depot. And so you're seeing these businesses make different calculations in a similar environment because their categories are different, their consumer segments are different, and their market positioning is different as well. And so I think it's just an important reminder that all companies are not going to react in a uniform way, even to the same policies.
Naman, I'm going to pull up my view. So same topic, different headline. And just wanted to kind of double down on some of what you're saying, but also go a little bit further because I saw something snuck in the bottom of this that I felt like was really powerful and insightful. Um, so kind of like you, right, running to reinforce this message. Home Depot stuck by its revenue guidance, which basically to me says they think that consumer sentiment is strong. They believe that people will continue to purchase. However, they missed Wall Street's first quarter earnings estimates, and that was the first time since May 19th, 2020, that they missed earnings estimates. So they've overperformed on earnings ever since then, which to me raises a little bit of eyebrows on the like lack of price increases issue because I think what they're really saying is that their overall prices, you won't see an increase everywhere. But I don't think that they're saying that they won't raise prices. I actually think they're saying that they will raise prices on goods from China. I think they're saying that they will raise prices on goods that are coming from tariffed countries. So this headline, I think, is very misleading based on what I read into the details and looked further into everything else. But also, this I think was a super important piece that wasn't mentioned in a lot of the headlines, right? As higher interest rates slow the housing market, the retailers attracted more business from home professionals and acquired SRS distribution. The acquisition of SRS distribution accounted for, according to the reports that I read, 2.9 of their approximately $3.6 billion in profit growth. And so what we're seeing here is actually that they've not just insulated themselves against tariffs, but they've insulated themselves against products. They've moved into a services segment of the business that is, servicing from their product supply. But this diversification is a big part of what we're looking at. And so I just wanted to go down here, right? Right, because of our scale, great partnerships with our suppliers and productivity that we continue to drive in our business, right? We intend to generally, I want to highlight that also, maintain our current pricing levels across our portfolio. If you maintain 90% of your pricing levels because 8% of your product comes from China, you are generally maintaining your current pricing levels. But I don't think that means that we're not raising prices because of tariffs. So when I read into this a little bit, I don't think they're saying, hey, we're just going to squeeze margin. I think they're saying you're just not going to see the massive effect of it in a place that you would like Walmart.
I would
You want to,
argue that that message is meant just as much for their suppliers as it is for their customers. I think that's a backhanded way of telling their suppliers if you don't play ball, we're gonna raise prices on the product, your product that's on our shelves, and you're gonna lose share. And so I think that's important nuance in the language there. I think that they've been having private conversations with their suppliers. A lot of them have moved supply chains, a lot of them have moved manufacturing, but the ones that aren't, I think this is their way of trying to put some more pressure on those suppliers.
Agreed, right? And right, you see here, right? Home Depot and its suppliers have worked to diversify the source of the company's imports. But over the past several years, I think this is really important because we looked at a chart about 3 weeks ago that said, hey, these imports from China are not at an all-time high. So we're not trying to shift share at an all-time high. This kind of cascade away from China began a few years ago. And I think that this is an important kind of piece of a longer term strategy. This was good for Home Depot before it was politically popular. And I think that's an important insight because they have had more leverage. And overall, this last statement here, right? By this time next year, no single country outside of the US will represent more than 10% of the company's purchases. That is supplier power.
This is the new world we live in where you don't just want category diversification, you also want geopolitical diversification, you want supply chain diversification. You don't want to be overexposed to any one market, not just from a customer perspective, but from a supplier perspective as well.
Absolutely. And then if you kind of again go down here, right? you kind of you're looking at a few of these like lower pieces, right? Sales patterns. It was kind of going back through here, more challenging backdrop. Then it kind of talks about this SRS distribution. I think this is the big story nobody's talking about because, right, here's what it said, right? Sales grew roughly 9% from 9.96.42 billion, about 2.6 billion of that year over year gain came from SRS's business. So if you calculate it, 9% of that, would have been just under 3 billion. 2.6 of it, almost all of the gain in revenue came from the SRS business. And so both that there's a potential that there's a constraint in their earnings. There was a little bit of contraction in earnings, but overall, they're seeing growth that is not in their traditional core business. And that's actually, giving them additional leverage in the product segments.
That's another reason overall they're keeping prices flat because
Absolutely.
they're trying to spur demand in that retail segment. One of the things I was looking at this morning is that and you actually see it here as well, is
Mhm.
that their average kind of basket size hasn't increased,
Yep.
not meaningfully. And so I think that's a
And in a
sign
time
that
of rising inflation,
in a
that's
time
a
of rising
challenge, actually.
inflation, that is a challenge. So really, nominally, like their basket size has probably decreased when you inflation adjust it. And so you think about their core consumer, you think about their retail segment. Okay, people aren't spending more in our stores. Our traffic is, marginally up as well. Most of our profit is coming from this new acquisition. It's not the right time to raise prices across the board.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, right, the customer is pretty strong. We've gone back to affluence being more important, more tied to employment than to actual money in the bank. And you see here that they kind of highlighted this, right? Their affluent US customer tends to be employed, which means not just employed in general and affluent, but not retired. So somebody who's currently actively employed, who has disposable income to spend, and this increase in property values, I think that you're right about that. HELOCs are not as much of a big issue, but I do think that people feel the comfort and security of investing in their homes, even with cash, when they feel like the property values have
I think
appreciated.
there's also a psychological wealth effect. And I'd be interested to see some data on this. If you're listening to this and you've seen data on this, send it our way. Like, does consumer sentiment increase when home values are appreciating at the rate that we've seen over the last 5 years? Like, do people feel better about their own financial situation when their home values are exploding? Do they feel better about their financial situation when their portfolios are exploding, even if those are illiquid assets? Right. And so I think that might be a part of what Home Depot is alluding to is that people feel richer when their houses appreciate in value, even though they actually don't have any more money in their pocket.
And just to kind of double down on that a little bit, I was watching a little mini episode from Chip and Joanna Gaines of Magnolia this week, and just to connect the dots, their new line of shows is called Mini Resi. Yeah, so mini renovations. And like right, this line here, even so, McPhail said that do-it-yourself customers are tending to defer bigger projects and engaging in smaller and spring-related projects. So I think like there was I didn't really understand why that launch was happening in that space, and now I get it. Right. So connecting the dots between different pieces, what they're trying to do is spur demand in smaller size projects where people don't have to take out HELOCs, but hopefully a lot of people are doing these kind of minor home improvement projects, keeping the spend churning and keeping the wheel moving.
I'll just refer back to January, the episode I did on Friday on the US housing market. And we talked about how the US housing market and kind of the extension of the housing market, which I would consider Home Depot to be an extension of the housing market, adjacent to that market, makes up 16% of US GDP. And how there are far-reaching effects when the housing market slows, like into the broader economy. Like it has tentacles that go everywhere. And I think, go back and listen to Friday's episode if you didn't, because we unpack a lot about why the housing market is slowing, what some of the drivers are, what the implications are, kind of just the staggering size of the US housing market's contribution to overall GDP. And now I think at a micro level, you're starting to see that effect in places like Home Depot, which is what we're talking about today.
One last thing that I want to say here before we sign off today. I think that what in my overall summary of Home Depot is that the tariffs have an impact on their business. I do expect that they're going to raise their small category of prices that are impacted by tariffs. If they truly believe that customers are strong, I do think that we're going to see price increases. I think that they're not as confident in the customer as we think that they may be. I think that's potentially a bigger part of their pricing strategy is not to stifle demand, but also I think that they are a more diverse business than a lot of people at the surface recognize, especially with this purchase that they made of SRS. And I think it's really important that when we're looking at a business, when we're thinking about advising companies, we don't just take the headline and we go one level deeper and we understand what really might be going on under the surface. But overall, it was a fun Home Depot day for me. What about you?
It was honestly,
Are you wearing
I just
orange,
thought
Namaan? We should have worn orange today. What are we
we should
doing?
have, we should have. I just, as I was looking at the numbers and then looking at the narrative, I just found myself calling bullshit on the narrative. And so, like, that's as I was reading the article, I was like, I don't think what you're saying aligns with the numbers that you're reporting. And so it's going to be interesting to see, right? I think this is the power of storytelling. And this is why, you have some stocks that appreciate beyond kind of fundamental reasons, right? Like they become story stocks. And so I think this is what you're seeing play out in real time here, and we'll see how the markets respond to Home Depot's earnings. Do they believe the numbers or do they believe the story? Or is there some combination of both? But for me, I believe the numbers. I don't necessarily believe the story. I think the only bright light for me in this report is what you mentioned, which is the earnings from SRS. But overall, like I personally am pretty pessimistic in the short term on Home Depot's retail business.
It'll be awesome to keep a track of it. I can't wait until we get to the place where we're seeing the next quarter and we're able to see whether or not our predictions and insights are as we suspected they would be. But today, this episode of Market Outsiders was brought to you so that you could think about businesses beyond the surface level and go beyond it to tie what's happening in a single business to the broader markets and to the economy. We hope you enjoyed it. Please join us on Thursday for our extended live, where we'll have an audience in the Zoom that we share with everyone else. If you haven't already gotten your ticket to join that, it's free. Just make sure that you click and register. We will look forward to seeing you on Thursday here